Psychic Radio, WYCD HD3 Detroit, KJAQ HD3 Seattle, WBMX HD3 Boston, and on AOL Radio and Yahoo Launchcast.
What are the differences between paranormal research in North America and Europe? What are all those gadgets ghost hunters haul around are actually supposed to do? And ultimately, do ghosts cause paranormal phenomena, or do we?
Hey, and welcome to the 112th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and that voice you just heard was that of my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. I don't know why I paused there, but it was a pause for effect. Let's just go with that.
There you go.
And our call-in numbers today on CBS New Sky Radio and newskyradio.com tonight are 248-545-7685. And again, that is 248-545-7685. And if you're listening on a computer, or use the nifty instant feedback feature on the right of the newskyradio.com homepage as you listen live.
And also on parax.com. We're not quite up to handling the chat room yet, but we'll get there. Now, I have to tell you that our interview tonight was wonderful with Shane Eno of the Paranormal Institute of Denmark. Unfortunately, we are having technical difficulties with the recording, and we're going to need more time to get it up to snuff to broadcast it to you. And so we're going to, unfortunately, have to reschedule that guest until a future date when we can work that out. But I will say that you will love this interview with Shane. And as we said in the beginning, paranormal investigation in Europe is somewhat different than it is here. There's a lot of skepticism in Europe among the public. Only about 1/3 of people say that they believe in paranormal phenomena. And Shane's group, however, is still among the most respected in Europe. They work mostly in Denmark and Sweden, and I found them to be very systematic, very clear in their thinking, very appropriately skeptical, and especially in their use of gadgets, which in America, of course, being drunk with technology here, we put implicit
It's like James
trust.
Bond.
Yeah, very much so. So anyway, we will reschedule that as soon as we can on a coming show, and you'll get to hear Shane in his full glory.
But thanks to the wonders of technology, you won't be hearing that tonight.
No, apparently not. Anyway, one of the things that, and Ben, we've talked about this before, one of the things that, obviously we're going to Plan B, we're just going to have a discussion tonight, I'm going to talk about some cases, was that the whole idea of infrasonics. And infrasonics is the effect that sound can have on paranormal phenomena, either on our brains or on the phenomena themselves.
Oh, yeah, you were explaining before, but I was probably half asleep at the time.
Yeah,
yes, continue.
Okay, well, I don't know if you were around. This was in our own house back in, I think it was 2001.
I don't think I remember that. Actually, I kind of remember it happening, but I was just like, all the
exactly.
time. So.
Well, the thing is, as I say in one of my books, that one of the benefits of being a paranormal investigator is that you do not expect your own house to be haunted.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so as a result, I was somewhat shocked one night to wake up to the bed shaking. All right. Mom never, World War III couldn't wake her up, but the mattress is shaking. I got up and I walked out into the upstairs hallway, and I felt the electrical tingle that we feel when something's present or something's going on. I said, whoa, what's going on here? So I took my own advice, and I got out the old EMF meter, electromagnetic field meter, and it led me, not right then, this is the next day, led me right to Jonathan's, Ben's older brother's, fish tank in his room on the same floor of the house. And this thing was pumping out, I think it was like 2,000 milligauss, which is high enough to cause a health hazard. So a huge magnetic field was being created by this thing. And also a hum, a very small hum that was not discernible to the ear. And you can translate EMF readings into sound. Shane Eno has done that. Shane, not being a relative of ours, but he has pioneered in this field as well. Anyway, this is what happened, and we got rid of that pump, and all phenomena ceased immediately. No more shaking beds, no more feelings of presences, this sort of thing. And this has been duplicated in experiments around, especially in a British laboratory where the same thing occurred, and it turned out that a faulty fan was creating a standing wave, this hum sound, a standing wave in an enclosed area. And that can be caused by, wind blowing over the top of the house, or faulty subwoofer.
Yeah, subwoofers.
Yeah, on your stereo. Woof, woof. And there you go. You can. But the question is, are these things caused? Do these things cause you to imagine basic paranormal phenomena or to experience them, or do they create open doors in the fabric of space-time through electromagnetic energy that allow actual phenomena to occur? And this is the big question. Now, Shane pointed out during our interview, and once we have it on, you'll hear it, that in Denmark, the power plants will occasionally shut down for cleaning of the turbines. And when this occurs, the turbines apparently make a sound that is equivalent to about 19 hertz on the sound scale, if you will, decibel scale. And it will create all sorts of interesting phenomena in the area. Sometimes people can hear it, even though we're not supposed to hear sounds at that level. But they will sometimes create, again, the illusion of paranormal phenomena through infrasound. And he said they get all kinds of reports to his group, the Paranormal Institute of Denmark, from people in the area where the turbines are being cleaned. And I thought that was fascinating. It's certainly a vindication of the whole infrasound theory to a point, but also an indication that maybe doors are being opened here, and whole sections of nations are experiencing these things when this occurs. And this is, maybe this is something to do with the basis of paranormal flaps, where these things simply explode, these phenomena.
That would make sense. Like Mothman, for example.
Yeah.
If that happened around an old, military, what was it, industrial...
they used to make dynamite, the TNT arrays, they called it, and they were not only the Mothman phenomenon, this weird creature who'd chase people and scare the dickens out of people whenever they're outside the village or the town, but also UFOs. There were poltergeist phenomena, and we've interviewed people who were experienced that. Matter of fact, we've been down there ourselves, yes. And this occurred mostly in the 60s, so people say it's still going on. And one wonders about perhaps the seismic nature. There is a phenomenon known as the Taos, Taos, as in Taos, New Mexico, where you're going in April, actually, that area. Taos, New Mexico, the Taos hum. And no one has ever quite explained it. It's thought to be perhaps seismic, but it does occur, and it sounds like, I guess, a large diesel truck running in the distance. But there have been reports of various phenomena around that. Again, perhaps this infrasound thing, either creating the illusion of basic paranormal phenomena or opening doors in the fabric of the electromagnetic membranes that we believe are between these universes, yes, to maybe cause this stuff. Okay, so let's go to a case here as part of our Plan B this evening that I have never talked about on the air before. Ben was... who knows where or when this was occurring, because it was in July 1975. And
I think I wasn't even breathing yet.
No, well, somewhere you were, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this case was in Connecticut, and it was the scene of a very interesting poltergeist situation and it was the case that showed me that you don't have just a haunted house. That always indicates that a whole area is having some interesting things going on. It could be hot, as we say. It could be an area where a flap is occurring, or it could just be an area where worlds join and things happen. And now it's interesting that this occurred as a result of one of my first forays into broadcasting. Way back in '75, I was a seminary student, but at the same time, I had gotten involved with Ed and Lorraine Warren and a few other people who were involved in some early cable broadcasting in Connecticut. Now, at the time, it wasn't all that different. There was public access, and people would have shows. And a fellow by the name of Brian Dow, who was a well-known radio personality in Connecticut, was one of the first hosts of one of these cable TV shows. And it was about the paranormal. And that was very unusual at the time, because you had it was like Europe, I suppose. People were very skeptical about it. You didn't talk about it generally. If you were having an experience, usually clammed up about it. And even people like me who were working in the field, and there were very few who were doing it as students or non-professionally, were looked at with somewhat a jaundiced eye, shall we say, especially by the seminary authorities. Who were very, very reluctant to have me involved in this. Anyway, it was in July of '75. A poltergeist seemed to manifest in the town of Bristol, Connecticut, which is near the central part of the state. And it shattered dishes, people's nerves, and also a lot of the rules that I assumed were associated with this strange phenomenon of the poltergeist. And because it seemed to affect an entire neighborhood. Now, I had never encountered one before, now albeit I'd only been involved in this for a few years, that seemed to threaten an entire neighborhood, but it also seemed to surprise the Warrens and other people who had done this for many years. Now, this was a new housing development that had gobbled up most of an old hilltop farm, and everybody would say, aha, well, it's an old farm, people might have died there, and all this spiritualist 19th century stuff that people often will assume is an explanation for paranormal phenomena. Well, all but a few houses were new, and other lots farther up the road were still undeveloped. But I kind of reserved judgment here on this because I was thinking of new ways to explain the paranormal. Now, where the road entered the development, there was a farm building that had been turned into a private home, not longer than the newer houses had been built. So it had been a home for some time. Now, adjacent to this structure was a dilapidated cottage or shed that was in the process of being demolished. Now, right across from that was the development with the ranch house of John and Susan Sanford. That's not their actual name. Even after all these years, I'm very reluctant to give people's real names because this stuff can somehow come back to haunt them, pardon the pun. Yeah. They were both in their late 30s, and they had two sons, the ages of 10 and 12. Now, John was a real estate agent and had helped to sell the other neighborhood lots in this area. And his house had been one of the first to be built about 3 years earlier. This almost goes back to the movie Poltergeist, which hadn't been made yet because that involved a real estate development as well. Nothing particularly strange had disturbed the Sanfords during those first years, but the most hellish month of their lives was about to begin on that hot mid-July week. And apparently it was prompted by an act of kindness. It's kind of strange. Okay, we'll be right back to continue our case. Bristol, Connecticut, 1975. I'm Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno here on CBS New Sky Radio, newskyradio.com, and stay with us, as the man said.
Yes.
Be sure to check out Breakthrough with AJ Barrera, Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern on The Sky. Breakthrough with AJ Barrera will feature world-renowned experts in the body, mind, spirit fields. Authors, celebrities, conversations about personal life issues in today's society, and intuitive readings by AJ Barrera. It's a show that'll transform lives. Breakthrough with AJ Barrera, Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern, live on The Sky.
CBS Radio's The New Sky. Believe. NewSkyRadio.com.
I don't know, but I think I may be falling for you. Dropping so quickly, maybe I should keep this to myself. Wait until I know you better. I am trying not to tell you, but I want to. I'm scared of what you say, so I'm hiding.
Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
Hey there, we're back, and Ben's going to give our call-in numbers again if anybody cares to call in.
Well, all right. Here are the call-in numbers: 248-545-7685. That again is 248-545-7685. And if you're listening on the computer, use that nifty instant feedback feature on the right of your screen as you listen live.
Okay, our theme tonight was supposed to be Paranormal Adventures in Europe, but our guest, Shane Eno from Denmark, we had some problems with the technical end of the recording, and we will have to reschedule that, I'm afraid. But we have fallen back on Plan B, and we're talking about a case I've never talked about on the air before, and that is the Poltergeist of Bristol, Connecticut, that threatened an entire neighborhood. I worked on that case back in 1975. And as I said, I was on this cable show, one of the first cable shows in Connecticut at the time, about the paranormal, which was even more strange because it was not a really well-accepted subject at the time. And I was on with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and this case came up because the host of the show knew the fellow who was involved. And it turned out to be starting out as sort of a standard poltergeist case, but it did begin to affect an entire neighborhood, which at the time was something that sort of broke the rules. And in ensuing years, I've learned, and certainly Ben and I have learned now, that it's very, very unusual not to have a case in one house that does not affect the neighboring area, because the whole area becomes, as we say, hot or affected by paranormal flap or a joining of the worlds or something of this kind that causes what we call paranormal phenomena. So in any case, these folks had lived in a newly developed housing area on a hill where an old farm had existed, and the old farm building was occupied by a lady and her son who kept to themselves, and the children often in the neighborhood would make fun of the young boy who'd come out and ride his bicycle, and he was not accepted. And Mrs. Sanford here in one of the newer houses across the road felt very sorry for this child. And she decided to walk across the street one day and invite the mysterious neighbor to have coffee with her. And Mrs. Sanford found that this lady was a nervous but congenial 45-year-old woman whose name was Hobbs. And shortly they were seated in the Sanford kitchen over coffee and pastry. And the Sanford's little dog, however, usually friendly, ran and hid as soon as this lady, Mrs. Hobbs, entered the house. And he wouldn't come out until she left. And it was a strange visit indeed, and the guest seemed reluctant to talk about herself. Mrs. Sanford had noticed that workmen who had been demolishing the old cottage adjacent to the Hobbs home had stopped working. And asked why this was, Mrs. Hobbs casually related that during the previous week, one of the workers had felt what he described as invisible cold hands, quote-unquote, around his neck and had fled the site, taking his crew with him. And the men refused to return, strangely enough. And the next day, Mrs. Hobbs returned the favor and invited her neighbor for tea. And Mrs. Sanford went over to the old farmhouse there and found the home rather gloomy and felt strangely uneasy there. Now, she nearly choked on a sip of tea when an ashtray suddenly rose from the coffee table and floated across the room. Her hostess, not in the least surprised, declared, "Oh, that's only the ghost." You know, I don't think you've run into this yet, Ben, but I've run into it time and again. And people, they get used to this stuff, and I find that extremely disconcerting. Needless to say, Mrs. Sanford made a polite but hasty exit. Now, Mrs. Hobbs' next visit to the Sanford home a few days later was her last because, as Mrs. Sanford told me later, the woman, quote, brought the thing with her, unquote. The visit was pleasant enough, but paranormal activity erupted as soon as Mrs. Hobbs left. Dishes flew from their shelves and smashed on the floor. Furniture started jumping around, and pictures fell from the wall. Mrs. Sanford, understandably frantic, called her husband at his real estate office and told him to come home. Now, at about the same time, the two Sanford boys got off the school bus at the corner. Now, the activity had stopped by this time, but when the boys walked through the door, they thought the place had been broken into and ransacked. And before John Sanford saw the house for himself, he had thought his wife had been joking. Well, the Sanfords all felt that some unseen agency from across the street had been at work. And they believed that the old, half-demolished cottage had something to do with it. Now, poltergeist phenomena plagued the Sanford home through the following week. Not only did objects move around by themselves, but all 4 family members heard an animal-like growling coming from beneath beds and other furniture. Quote, terrifying eyes, they described as flaming red, appeared at windows, and knocks were heard at the doors at all hours of the day and night. Of course, when the doors were open, no one was there. What do the red eyes remind you?
Mothman.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you often find there is a strange phenomenon which we've dealt with on the show here and there. It's known as the tulpa. It's a Tibetan Buddhist concept, and it is that sometimes people can project, and sometimes deliberately project, and literally create an entity of some kind. And this is usually a bad idea because the thing, you can't get rid of it. I've had people tell, you remember that, what was that case in Canada? Because I followed it, matter of fact,
that case in Canada or something. Was it Canada when those college students?
Yeah, it was around Toronto. Yeah, the college students literally, it was a paranormal group on campus. They literally created an entity, or at least they believe they did. I think what they did was attract a parasite who was attracted to all the concentration and the food possibilities of it.
Yes.
But in any case, this occurred. Bad idea. Okay, so the tulpa, something that appears to be an entity that is created or at least brought deliberately to an area here, and you often see the red eyes, animals under the furniture, things of this kind. And it sounds like science fiction, but I've seen it myself,
yes.
And it is extremely disconcerting, to say the least.
Yes.
All right. Now, toward the end, of course, the knocking on the doors, we had that in the case the year before that, which was the great Bridgeport poltergeist case of 1974. That happened, too. Now, toward the end of this week in July 1975, the disturbances began to spread. And this is what I found very interesting. The Sanfords learned that 4 neighboring families also had heard the strange knocks, and 2 of the neighbors had been frightened out of their wits by objects that had moved by no apparent means. People had seen red eyes looking through the windows. Now, like many poltergeist victims, the Sanfords told nobody what was happening for fear of ridicule, and only when a neighbor mentioned that strange things were happening at her house on a more minor scale did Mrs. Sanford learn the extent of the problem. Now, then, she confided in her victimized neighbors and told them what was going on. Now, an incident at the very end of the week shook the Sanfords into the realization that they needed help. And in broad daylight, Mrs. Sanford said she saw a huge black form move through the field across the road and disappear into the wall of the old cottage. Again, this is something that is not unusual in some of these cases. Now, not knowing what kind of help to get, the family confided in a friend who was this Brian Dow, this local radio personality, and he contacted me when I was on the set of his cable show the following week. So off I went. It was a grim, overcast day when I went to the Sanford house, and there I found Mrs. Sanford and one of the affected neighbors who filled me in on the most recent events in their respective homes. All phenomena seemed to have ceased, they said, after Mrs. Sanford saw that dark shape in the field. Now, you do notice these things come and go. Now, in the case of you and I have been working on, Ben, in Connecticut, this business with the farmhouse, which we've talked about on the air frequently, and you have things come and go. Things, you can go for a certain period where nothing happens, and then starts up again. And now we're into the UFO scene, which seems to be part of that case as well. So in any case, after this initial briefing by the 2 ladies, I walked over to the Hobbs property to look at what was left of the cottage there that the guys had said they stopped tearing down because they felt cold hands around their neck, or at least one of the workers did. And I started to take photographs. Now, nothing unusual happened until I approached the structure. Now, about 15 feet from the ruins, I was abruptly halted by what I can only describe as a wall of electrical energy. And again, this is familiar to many. It doesn't happen to everyone, but it's familiar to many of those who investigate these phenomena, and it indicates the presence of some kind of disturbance in an electromagnetic field that may be paranormal in nature, the presence especially of an entity of some kind. Now, this is very interesting. You know, everybody talks about the cold spot. Have you ever experienced the cold spot when you've gone into...
I'm always cold, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay, yeah, your hands are always cold. You could be like an actor in a Bela Lugosi film.
Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, good old poor boy. He had a sad life. Yeah. Anyway, I think I can point to once in 40 years of paranormal investigation what I just don't experience this cold. I don't understand it. What I do experience are these electrical phenomena. My hair practically stands on end. It will get faint. You and I have walked into rooms and had similar reactions.
It's mostly my hands. My hands get all tingly. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, now see, that doesn't happen to me, but the faintness.
It's like a metal detector.
Well, you're a shaman, or I'm a hobbit. I'll tell you. I mean, some of the experiences you have are absolutely right out of.
Oh, you're a hobbit.
Oh boy. Anyway, so here we go with this electrical feeling about 15 feet from these ruins, and I was abruptly stopped by this.
Hobbits.
And again, it's familiar to most of these things.
I just keep thinking.
All right, Bilbo, take it easy.
All right.
All right. So, and my hair practically stood on end with this thing. Now, these feelings, along with the absence of high-tension wires or any kind of impending electrical storm or any stuff that was around that could have been producing this, led me to question my original suspicion that these people were the victims of a practical joker rather than a poltergeist. Okay. The site seemed to be a powerhouse of psychic energy.
Lol.
Okay. Anyway, when I happened to return to the Sanfords, I suggested that I talk to Mrs. Hobbs herself, her son, and the other neighbors involved. And I also wanted to return in a few days and go over the property again. Now, with that, I said goodbye and drove away. But while I was willing to call it a day, whatever was plaguing the neighborhood apparently was not. As I turned onto the main road, the same energy I'd felt at the cottage became evident in my poor old car, 1968 Ford Fairlane. All at once, both doors flew open and a stiff wind tore through, blowing everything, except me, fortunately, out onto the road. My cars have never been known for interior neatness, as Mom will be happy to tell anybody who asks. So the debris I had gathered and the stuff back inside, I had to put a considerable work into doing that to get it off the road. Now, feeling like a character in a horror movie, I made it home without further incident. Now, I found that here's an answer to the question, can these things follow you? All right. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Very often, as in this case, looking back on it, I think it was this particular entity, whatever it was attached to the land and could not go very far from that land. I find that time and again in a number of cases. So anyway, 2 days, we're coming up on another break here, but 2 days later I had a lab report confirming that what had appeared in two of my photographs couldn't be explained as ordinary photographic anomalies. Now again, this is the days of old Kodak film and photo labs using negatives. Nothing was digital. We didn't even have cell phones. Can you young people imagine that? In one, which graces the cover of what?
I'd like not having a cell phone.
Yes, it's a sense of liberation in a way.
Yeah.
In this case, it would have come in handy. But in any case, in one of these photos, there was literally a face, and it does grace the cover of my 1998 book, Faces at the Window.
Yes.
And I emphasize that when you look at that picture, and it is, of course, in living color from the 1970s, there was no glass in this window. It looks like a reflection, but it is not. There was nothing but wood. So quite interesting there. And we are going to wrap for a break now, and we'll come back to talk about this amazing poltergeist neighborhood assault, 1975, Bridgeport, Connecticut, here on Behind the Paranormal on CBS New Sky Radio, newskyradio.com. Stay with us.
Psychic Radio. 24 hours a day. Reach out from beyond to your ears. On the web now. Log on to psychiconair.com. Your spiritual well-being is our concern. This is Psychic Radio. Powered online by AOL at psychiconair.com.
We know you're listening.
Well, I just heard the news today. It seems my life is gonna change. I close my eyes, begin to pray, then tears of joy stream down my face. My arms wide open under the sunlight. Welcome to this place. I'll show you everything with arms wide open. With arms wide open.
famed sound healer, author, and radio host Mark Pattison brings you a weekly inspirational message with your 11-minute miracle, followed by the best mediums, psychics, and best-selling self-help authors. Join us for the best new thought program out there. It's called Dynamic Transformations with Mark Patterson. It's Monday from 9 to 10 Eastern, exclusively on CBS Radio's PsychicOnAir.com, powered by CBS.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com.
Okay, we're back, and we're minus our guest who had technical difficulties, and we're talking about the Poltergeist outbreak in Bridgeport, Connecticut in 1975, which I've never talked about on the air before, but it was a milestone in my own career because it taught me that you don't have haunted houses, you have haunted neighborhoods. All right. Yes, indeed.
Yes, as you were saying.
As I was saying.
Yes.
After the entity blew open the door of my car and threw everything out, except me, I was able to get back with some of our film and was able to get some anomalous judgments from the Kodak Photo Lab that we worked with at the time. We, not being Ben wasn't even born yet.
No.
But anyway, in one of these photos, as I say, it's on the cover of my 1998 book, Faces at the Window, and there was a bearded face apparently looking out this window. And I must stress that the window did not have glass in it. It was nothing but a boarded-up window of a door, and so it was not a reflection in all this business, so they thought it was anomalous. Several associates of mine thought that they saw the crouching figure of a stout little boy. The associates included Ed and Lorraine Warren at the time. A figure of a stout little boy looking into a puddle in front of the ruins in a third photo, which I took. But a laboratory examination didn't prove anything one way or the other on that. Now, the next evening, I went to a social gathering that included several psychics and investigators of the paranormal, such as there were at the time, and some of whom knew about the Sanford's poltergeist because the Warrens had been on the same show with me and had heard the same report from Brian Dow. Now, among the psychics was my old friend, Mary Pascarella, head of the Psychic Research Institute in Hamden, Connecticut, which I do not believe exists anymore. And she sat down with me and told me what she thought was going on. Now, I'd given her some cursory information, and only later did she see the photographs. Now, Mary felt that a retarded child named Jeremy had been confined to the cottage in the late 19th or early 20th centuries. Now, at that time, such children were considered a shame to the family very often instead of an occasion for extra love, and many were locked away by their families and otherwise abused. This was the case with Jeremy, according to Mary, who was probably illegitimate, she said, and added that he was apparently earthbound, quote-unquote, in the old cottage where he had suffered so much torment. Now, naturally, the photo with the boy-like shape near the puddle came to mind, and Mary herself saw that figure as well. Now, when I told her what happened in my car on the way home, Mary said the boy had followed me because she sensed I would understand him. She knew I had worked with retarded children in the past as part of my seminary ministry. And in theory, I was kind of skeptical about the notion of earthbound spirits, even then, because, again, I'd only been working in the paranormal for a few years, but the old explanations for things that everybody else accepted as dogma just made me uncomfortable. And to this day, Ben and I will talk about this, and we have guests who are eminent experts who come on and spout the old spiritualist 19th century dogma about what ghosts are and about what this is all about. And, hey, maybe they're right. Maybe we're wrong. But this is just not what I was seeing in my paranormal research. So anyway, I was a little bit skeptical, certainly not about Mary's sincerity, but about some of her interpretations of what she might have been seeing. Anyway, as things turned out, we never got a chance to find out who was right. Now, excuse me, all this time, my comrade in research, Joseph Latender, old friend of ours, lives in Chicago. He's been on the show talking about a case he was involved with me in earlier than this one in the 70s.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. He'd been burrowing through Bristol town records, and he'd found no mention of any Jeremy, but this isn't surprising if he had been the kind of child Mary described. But Louis did find that the old cottage had a questionable reputation indeed. It had been the site of prostitution, bootlegging, and other illegitimate activities during the 1920s. There had been shootings there and who knows what. So there would have been all kinds of problems. Which, of course, would modern-day Eno parlance, have attracted parasitical entities, which could have been feeding off the events that were taking place in the 1920s, even though we were noticing their activities in the 1970s, because all time is simultaneous. Anyway, a week after my initial interview with Susan Sanford, the lady who had all these experiences across the road there, Joseph and I were trying to start an investigation. With overt phenomena having ceased, it proved difficult to get the Sanfords or their neighbors to cooperate further, even though they still felt they were in danger. Now, their primary reason was fear of the media. Okay? Now, it's ironic that I spent 30 years as a working newsman, but I wouldn't let the media anywhere near any of my cases. Now, that's not hard to understand in view of the internationally publicized Bridgeport Poltergeist case that I'd been involved with less than a year before. And it proved just as difficult to contact Mrs. Hobbs. I never even saw her. So, while we heard later that the phenomena had resumed for a brief period at the Sanfords, I was never again contacted for assistance. And my radio newscaster friend said that the personalities of John and Susan Sanford had suddenly changed drastically. This is very interesting. When you've had this experience yourself, so have I. When you have contact with these entities that are negative and parasitical, you don't know how to deal with them.
Yeah.
It can change you.
Yep.
And then, it takes a while to come out of it. You need help and a lot of support.
Yeah.
And the Sanfords shut us off and would not let us back in because we were telling them this and they didn't want to hear it. Their finances collapsed and their divorce was mentioned and they eventually moved away. I never heard any more about it, not even from the Dow family, who also lost touch with them. Very sad situation. So what was really going on here? And now, this case never resulted in a full investigation. I did have a brush with a very unusual poltergeist, and if I'd known then what I know now, or think I know now, I would have brought in some more cameras and information and maybe a few other experts to find out. In those days, however, again, a paranormal investigation was what there were of them were very much seat-of-the-pants operations. And I think I wonder if perhaps they already had a troubled marriage, these Sanfords, and whatever was working across the road there might have tied right into that and began to feed upon it and began to make trouble. All the ducks, so to speak, lined up, came together for a very, very bad situation. And this is the thing. You always take your best defense against these things. You keep your family strong. You keep your eye on your goal. You stay positive, you stay focused, and I know Ben's sick of me talking about this, but I love that photograph of him and me. I don't know, you were less than a year old,
yeah.
And he's sitting on my lap in an office, and I'm really smiling. And this is on Facebook, you can see this. And he's like 6 or 8 months old, and he's got his thumbs up, And to me, that's my son. Can do, positive thinking. You can do anything if you do it together. I love that. I just think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the answer. That's how you defend against these things. And you find that when these people are together, people, even if you live in a house that's in a hot area, nothing is going to touch you. And I think, as I say, that's love is everything. I think a perfect example of that is our friends who live right here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, where we live. And I'm not going to give you their names, but their case is expounded upon in my O2 book, Footsteps in the Attic. And they had a very potentially negative situation. The area is hot, but they are the most loving family. They are together. They laugh all the time, not at each other.
Yeah.
But, they're among the most witty and humorous and intelligent people I know. And they'll come downstairs, and they found the rocking chair rocking by itself, and we got some interesting photos in the attic. But it was pretty much just somebody living there and occupying the same space in a different world.
Oh, now I know who
You could have smiled just thinking. I saw her this morning, matter of fact. And, again, keep it positive. It's not all that difficult to do so. Realize that it's not about me, it's not about you, it's about us, and nothing will hurt you. Okay, we're going to take another break here on Behind the Paranormal, and we'll be back, and we're going to talk about a case in Australia, so stay with us.
Join Mystic Radio with Rob and Alexis Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern and 12 noon Pacific as metaphysical mother and TV personality Rob and Alexis helps countless people around the globe live fuller and more conscious lives. Robin serves you using her gifts as a medium, medical intuitive, past life reader, and more. Get your free on-air readings Wednesday at 3 Eastern and 12 noon Pacific, right here on the Sky. And check out Robin's Soul Spa at robinalexis.com.
around for the weekend, figuring which club to sneak in. Fancy drinks and $50 cover charge. Lately it's been a big hassle, Heineken and Newcastle. So make sure he's fitting in and living large. Disregard the lies that he will tell her what he's probably like, 'cause it's not hard. His charm is gonna get him through the night. If he wants to rock, he rocks. If he wants to roll, he rolls. He can roll with the punch as long as he feels like he's in control. If he wants to stay, he stays. If he wants to go, he goes. He doesn't care how he gets there, long as he gets somewhere he knows. Oh no, na 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 na. See her, heavy makeup and cut t-shirt. Every girl out wants to be her, but they look the same already. Why adjust? Reading the magazine secrets, forgetting the topical regrets. If she comes home all alone, the night's a bust. It's a must. The swivel at her hips and the look she gives, it's all a trust. If only in the morning she knew where she lived. 'Cause if she wants to rock, she rocks. If she wants to roll, she rolls. She can roll with the punch as long as she feels like she's in control. If she wants to stay, she stays. If she wanna go, she goes. She doesn't care how she gets there, long as she gets somewhere she knows. Oh no, na 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 na. And in a wink, they're on the brink, drink to drink, and at the bar with cash to blow, from shot to shot. It's getting hot, advance the plot to see how far it's gonna go. All depends, so dip the friends and grab a cab, another chance, cheap romance. Doesn't count 'cause the room is spinning, nothing to lose, they both are winning. And they fall in love as they fall in bed, they sing. If they wanna rock, they rock. If they wanna roll, they roll. They can roll with the punch as long as they feel like they're in control. If they wanna stay, they stay. If they wanna go, they go. They don't care how they get there, long as they get somewhere they know. Oh no, na 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 na.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
And we're back, and I mentioned we're going to do a case from Australia, but I see we haven't got that much time left, and this thing is really long. It's from Wayne Bradley in Adelaide, Australia, who was a listener from way back, I guess. He's written to us before, but it's very long. I want to do it justice, so I think we will, on second thought, kind of skip it. I wanted to give you Shane Eno's website here. Shane was supposed to be our guest tonight, but we had technical difficulties. He lives in Denmark, and the time difference being rather world class, we decided to pre-record the interview, and we'll have to get that straightened out and we'll play it at a future date. Anyway, his website is www.paranormal with a letter T .dk, Paranormal Institute of Denmark. Okay. Now, in our last few minutes here, I wanted to maybe Ben and I can wrap. That's a 1970s term since we're talking about the 70s here.
Wait, what are we talking about?
Well, I didn't say it yet.
Oh, okay, go for it.
The whole notion of residual hauntings. Now, one of the greatest things about being a show host like this, I mean, for 40 years I've been a paranormal investigator. Ben's been around for 5. And we don't really go to a lot of conferences. A lot of people don't like what we have to say. Some people don't understand it. But I think far more do understand it and respond to it than don't. And some of the people, I think, who don't like what we have to say are a lot of the eminent experts in this field. And one of the great things about hosting this show is that we get to meet many of these people who we wouldn't see because we don't go to a lot of conferences. And we get to know fantastic people in all areas of the paranormal, ghosts and UFOs and this sort of thing. But there are many of them, and I would say they are in a minority, the ones we've had as guests, who strike me in a negative way. I don't think that a lot of these so-called experts know an awful lot about anything. And I hate to be negative about it, But they come on there, they cling to the old ideas. They jump on the paranormal gravy train that seems to be steaming down the track right now because there's it's such a popular subject, and they're good showmen. And I think that is pretty much what a lot of them are about. Not most, but some anyway. And I find that very disturbing.
Yes.
Because many of them are among the most prominent names. And on the other hand, with the vast majority of our guests, we have tremendous discussions. They're not afraid to look at new ideas, new possibilities, and most importantly, what all this means for us as a species and what it means for our destiny. I think that's the real question. One of the things that comes up a lot is this whole notion of residual hauntings.
Oh yeah, we've been talking about that for like a month now.
We have, but it keeps coming up because people keep bringing it up. We get emails on it, and some of the guests will say, well, this was a residual haunting. And what that's supposed to mean is that some event in the past was recorded somehow on the environment and like plays back like a recording to anybody who happens to be tuned just right in order to hear it. Now, as I've said before, I was one of the early advocates of that theory back in the 70s, and I very quickly came to the conclusion that it's not good enough. Like most of these other theories that people abide by, it's not good enough. And we were looking at this case in Bristol, Connecticut, where the psychic told me that the little boy tried to follow me home, and the little boy who'd been resident of this old shack and everything, and all this stuff was because of him. Well, I took that kind of with a pillar of salt because this kind of thing, nothing in the paranormal is what it seems to be. And this had so many negative overtones about it that I didn't feel any little boy involved at all. And these things can come across as an abused little boy or a former lover or whatever, and everybody says, aha, this is what it is. Well, again, when you look deeply, when you test it, when you spend the time necessary on a case to really examine what's going on, very often, if you express the feeling, this is not what I believe you really are, the whole thing changes. And sometimes people have said to me, well, you got, it was really Grandpa, but you got him angry. Man, baloney. Let's get a grip here.
You know what I don't like about Pop Ghost Hunters is that they film them going in. They're like, oh, well, the conclusion is we found that there's a ghost, and they just leave. They don't do anything about it.
Exactly. This is the tip of the iceberg. You're not going to learn anything about icebergs unless you look at the whole thing, right? And, had the Titanic, had they known at the time that icebergs were not just what's on the top, there was the vast majority of them were beneath the surface, they might not have hit the bloody thing and might have been more careful, but that's simplifying a momentous situation. What we've got, I think, are people who just do not look beyond the ends of their noses in many cases. And this whole residual haunting thing is an example. I mean, recorded on what? Okay? When I'm outside, we're outside and we have a case that's in a wilderness area where there's really nothing to have recorded on, presumably the thing being in the past. What, trees? The trees aren't the same. Topsoil, that's different. Rocks, maybe? I don't know, maybe. We've had instruments that I've gone out at several times and tried to measure any sort of emanations coming from these rocks. There hasn't been any. Inside a house, I can see it might be a more plausible theory, but I don't believe that either because in many cases I have interacted with entities in cases that are supposed to be, were reputed to be residual hauntings. They had all the classic textbook characteristics of recordings on the environment. But by interacting with them, I have managed to change the situation and found out that we're dealing with real people from the past or sometimes from the future. Because, again, this is why I believe what I believe. Simultaneous time. Everything happens at once, so to speak. So we are coming down to the wire here, and we had an interesting impromptu discussion, I like to think.
Yes.
And we want to just remind everyone that check us out, behindtheparanormal.com. On our website, you can find the schedules and the guests we plan to have. Usually they do manifest. We don't have these technical problems.
It's just today because technology sucks.
Yeah. Well, it only goes so far. But anyway, you got to rely on your own wit and wisdom to kind of get through things sometimes. Anyway, you can also buy my books on that site. You hear that? Buy my books. and on that site, behindtheparanormal.com, and there's all sorts of stuff about our past guests and stuff that's coming up. And you can link to our main site, newenglandghosts.com, and footstepsintheattic.com, which has a lot of interesting articles, I hope, on various aspects of the paranormal from our jaundiced eye and from our point of view, which I hope is interesting to those who are used to the same old baloney. And we'll talk about various aspects of the multiverse, things of that kind. We also would like to invite you to become a reporter, if you feel you can, for our show. We have a number of wonderful field reporters who call in now and then, and they, of course, are able to be on the show and report what's going on in their respective areas when it comes to UFO reports, cryptids, anything of that kind. And it's very interesting, and we have a great time with them. And you got, of course...
Oh, yes, and we have all the podcasts on our show page that are available at www.newskyradio.com or at our own website, www.behindtheparanormal.com as well.
And many thanks, of course, to our great producer, Will Kosnick, a good friend and a tremendous guy. And we'll see you right here next Sunday, February 21st. It's Mom's birthday, don't forget. At 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on CBS New Sky Radio and newskyradio.com, when we will welcome Mary Marshall, known as Medicine Horse Woman, an animal communicator and healer.
And in the meantime, check out our Saturday show at 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, on WOON 1240 a.m. in southeastern New England, and onworldwide.com. Also, you can hear our rebroadcasts of Behind the Paranormal on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, right here on CBS Radio.
And I want to remind you, we're going to stay tuned, of course, for CAPS Paranormal, which comes on here right after us. And we're going to be combining our shows, we plan to, on April 11th for a 3-hour special, a panel discussion with the likes of, hopefully, Stan Friedman and certainly Nick Pope, the great British UFO expert, and hopefully one of the witnesses of the Rendlesham Forest UFO incidents of 1980, and we're going to be talking about the 30th anniversary of that and what has been learned about it and what it means. April 11th. So stay tuned for that. And we're going to leave you with a quote from that old sweetheart, Albert Einstein: "Intellectual growth should commence at birth and cease only at death."